Wanting something too much is one of the most reliable ways to make sure you never get it. Sit with that for a moment. Your first instinct is probably to push back. That sounds like the kind of advice designed to make you lower your expectations, to want less so you hurt less. That is not what this is. This is something different, something more precise. Think about the last time you really needed something to work out. Not wanted, needed. Maybe it was a business idea you poured your savings into. Maybe it was an income you were counting on. Maybe it was a door you knocked on every single week until the knocking itself became the reason the door stayed closed. You worked harder. You wanted it more. And somehow, the harder you pushed, the more the outcome seemed to slide sideways and away from you. Like trying to catch water in a fist. You told yourself you needed to push harder, and so you did, and the gap grew. What no one told you, what almost no one talks about without wrapping it in language that sounds detached from real money and real life, is that the wanting itself carries a signal, a specific, measurable frequency in the way you speak, decide, and move. That signal does something to every opportunity it touches. By the time you finish what you are about to hear, you will not be told to want less. You will understand, at a level that changes your behavior without requiring willpower, exactly why the open hand receives what the clenched fist cannot hold. The answer is not what you have been told. And once you see it, you will not be able to unsee it. Chapter 1. The harder you want it, the further it runs. There is a pattern that has repeated across every culture that has ever tried to name the secret of a good life. In every era, in every language, in every sacred and practical text passed down to children, there is a warning buried inside the promise. The warning is this: the person who grasps tightest is the last one to hold anything. Civilization after civilization encoded this truth in stories, parables, proverbs, not as spiritual decoration, as practical instruction about how desire, when handled a certain way, becomes the very thing that dismantles itself. You are living that pattern right now, and what you are about to hear will be the first time someone has named it clearly enough that you can actually do something about it. Here is a question to hold from the very beginning. Why do some people who want wealth badly, who work for it, think about it, sacrifice for it, end up measurably further from it with each passing year? Not because they lack effort, not because they lack vision. So what is the real mechanism? Do not answer yet. Let that question stay open. Meet Theo. Theo was 31 years old, and he had been doing everything right. That is not a metaphor. He had the vision board above his desk. He had affirmations written in black marker on index cards taped to his bathroom mirror. He listened to motivational audio during his commute, sometimes the same track twice in one morning because one listen did not feel like enough. He had read 14 books on building wealth in 2 years. He tracked his income goals in a spreadsheet with color-coded projections. He woke up at 5:15 every morning because he had read that early rising was the habit of the wealthy, and he wanted to be wealthy more than he had ever wanted anything in his life. Theo had been doing this for 4 years. In those 4 years, his credit card debt had grown by $11,000. His savings account held less than it had when he started. 2 side projects launched with enormous early energy had quietly collapsed. A third one was still sitting in a notes app, unbegun. He was not failing from laziness. He was failing while trying harder than almost anyone he knew. That is the part that kept him up at night, the trying. You might know this feeling, not the laziness of someone who never began, but the exhaustion of someone who began 100 times. The particular kind of tired that comes not from doing nothing, but from doing everything and still watching the gap between where you are and where you want to be get wider instead of narrower. If you know that feeling, this chapter was written for you. Picture the shape of your life before these last 3 years unfolded as it really was, not abstractly. Picture the specific apartment or house, the specific job title or income, the specific moment you decided you were going to change things. You had a reason. You had a plan or the beginning of one. And somewhere in that decision was a hunger, a real one. You can feel it even now. That hunger was not the problem, but something about how you carried it became the problem. And that is what this chapter is going to name. Here is what almost no one talks about when they discuss desire and wealth. The wanting itself carries a signal. Not a mystical signal, a behavioral and neurological one. When you want something from a place of not having it, when the wanting is soaked in the awareness of absence, every action you take while in that state broadcasts the absence louder than the action itself. You negotiate from need, and the other person feels it before you finish your sentence. You pitch a client while internally desperate for the yes, and the desperation lives in your pace, your word choices, the half-second of hesitation before you name your price. You make a financial decision while afraid of staying poor, and the fear tilts the decision towards short-term relief instead of long-term positioning. The want does not pull the thing toward you. The want, when it is rooted in lack, pushes it further away. There is an old image that has appeared across many traditions of thought. Imagine a hand, open, relaxed, palm up. Now imagine the same hand gripped tight, fingers curled, knuckles pale. The open hand can receive anything. The gripped hand holds whatever it had and receives nothing new. Theo's hand was gripped. It had been gripped for 4 years. He was holding his desire so tightly, squeezing it so hard, that there was no space inside the grip for anything to arrive. Now think about a magnet. A magnet does not chase iron filings. It does not sprint after them or want them more fiercely when they fail to appear. It simply is what it is. The filings come because of what the magnet is, not because of what the magnet wants. The moment you replace the magnet with a hand reaching out and grabbing, the filings scatter. The property that was attracting them is overwhelmed by the motion of the grab. That is what Theo was doing every morning at 5:15. He was replacing the magnet with the grab. And here is what made it so invisible to him. Everything he was doing looked like the right behavior. Waking early, reading, planning, tracking, affirming. Every single action was socially endorsed, advice column approved, podcast recommended. None of it was wrong on the surface. But underneath each action was a current, a frequency, the frequency of a man who was acutely, constantly aware that he did not have what he was reaching for. That frequency is the villain in this story. Not laziness, not circumstance, not bad luck. The desperation frequency. The signal that radiates outward from need-based wanting and quietly dismantles what it is trying to build. It is invisible. It does not announce itself. Most people who carry it believe they are simply motivated, highly motivated. They confuse the intensity of the wanting with the quality of the signal, and those two things are not the same. Intensity is how loud the wanting is. Quality is what the wanting is made of. Theo's wanting was loud, but it was made of lack, and lack repeated daily with great intensity does not build anything. It just makes the lack more familiar, more present, more real. There was a woman named Carla who grew up in the same neighborhood as Theo. Same general starting conditions. Same limited financial background. But somewhere around the age of 28, Carla made a decision that looked, from the outside, like giving up. She stopped tracking her income goals obsessively. She stopped reading every book about wealth. She put the vision board in a closet. What she replaced it with was quieter and harder to see. She got very specific about one skill she was genuinely excellent at. She focused on the work itself rather than on what the work would eventually get her. She stopped calculating how each action would accelerate her arrival and started making each action clean and complete in itself. By 34, Carla was earning more than anyone she had grown up with, not because she stopped caring, because she changed what her caring was made of. The difference between Theo and Carla was not effort. It was not talent. It was the texture of their wanting. Theo's wanting announced his distance from the destination. Carla's wanting announced her relationship with the work. Let that sit for a moment before moving forward. This is the place where most conversations about desire and wealth get confused. Someone hears what Carla did and thinks, so I should not want things. I should pretend I do not care. I should perform indifference and trick the universe into giving me what I want. That is not what this book is about. That is not what Carla did. Performing detachment while secretly drowning in desperation is just desperation wearing a costume. The nervous system is not fooled. The people you are negotiating with are not fooled. The quality of your decisions is not improved. What Carla found was genuine, specific, and it is learnable. The principle is this: wanting from a place of lack encodes lack into every action you take. The pursuit itself, when driven by the absence of the thing being pursued, signals to every part of your psychology, your behavior, your relationships, your decision-making, that the thing is not here. And systems that believe something is not here will keep acting in ways that confirm that belief. The open hand is not passive. The open hand is still, and still is not the same as stopped. Now go back to the question from the beginning. Why do some people who want wealth badly end up measurably further from it with each passing year? You have the beginning of the answer, not the whole answer. That comes later, and some of it will directly contradict what most people believe about the role of desire in building a wealthy life. Once you see the contradiction clearly, it will resolve in a way that changes exactly how you act on any given Tuesday morning. But for now, the beginning of the answer is enough to move forward with. You have been gripping too hard. What happens when you open your hand? Chapter 2. The spiritual advice that made you needier. You already know what a vision board is. Almost everyone does. And almost everyone who has made one, who sat in front of it each morning, repeated affirmations into the bathroom mirror, visualized the dream house, the debt-free account, the promotion that felt perpetually out of reach. Almost everyone who did all of that still ended up in roughly the same place they started, or worse. The common belief is that these practices work, that millions of people do them. That the only problem is consistency or execution. That belief is wrong, not slightly wrong, wrong at the root. The tools themselves, applied in the exact way they are most commonly taught, do not neutralize the problem. they feed it. And nobody in that industry has much incentive to tell you that, because the entire industry runs on your continued wanting. That is the question this chapter is going to answer, not whether manifestation is real, but why the advice that is supposed to help you want smarter has made so many people want harder. Open your hand. The chapter before this left a question hanging and did not settle it. Standing there, palm up, wondering what happens next. The answer is less comfortable than most people expect. What happens when you open your hand is not that things fall out. What happens is that, for the first time, something can land. But there is a version of this you were probably taught that looks almost identical. You were told to hold your hands open and imagine the thing arriving. Picture it in precise detail. Feel the feeling of already having it. Breathe into the gratitude of a future that has not arrived yet. And you tried. You sat with your eyes closed and you conjured the car, the salary, the relationship, the calm that comes from never checking your account balance with dread. You held the image. You breathed through it. Then you opened your eyes and the number on your screen was the same. And somewhere in that gap between the vision and the reality, you felt worse than before you started. Here is why. There is a woman named 𝗓𝗢𝗧𝗔𝗡. She lived in a one-bedroom apartment in a city that cost more than she made. She was tired in the way that only debt can make a person tired, not sleepy, but heavy. She read the books, she did the work. Every morning at 6:15 she would sit cross-legged on her bed and look at the vision board taped to the back of her closet door. A convertible, a vacation photo from a beach she had never visited, a printout of a six-figure salary range she had found on a job site. She said her affirmations out loud. She wrote them in her journal. She did this for 11 months. At the end of those 11 months, 𝗓𝗢𝗧𝗔𝗡 was not closer to the beach. She was $3,000 deeper in the hole from the workshops, the journals, the online courses promising that the only thing standing between her and the life she wanted was her own subconscious. She was not calmer about money. She was more frantic about it. Because every morning she reminded herself precisely and in vivid detail exactly what she did not yet have. Think about that for a moment. The ritual that was supposed to bring her closer had done something very specific. It had made the distance visible every single day. And distance, felt daily, becomes desperation, quietly, gradually, in a way that feels like discipline but functions like pressure. This is not 𝗓𝗢𝗧𝗔𝗡's failure. 𝗓𝗓𝗧𝗔𝗡 did everything right by the instructions she was given. The instructions were designed for a different person. That is the thing nobody says plainly enough. Most wealth and manifestation advice was built by people who already had what they were teaching about, or by people who got results before the practice became a daily reminder of lack. When someone who is already financially stable does a visualization exercise, something specific happens neurologically. Their nervous system is at rest. They are imagining from a place of calm. The visualization adds texture to a life that already feels manageable. It reads to the brain like genuine anticipation, not like hunger. When you do the same visualization from inside a deficit, real bills, real shortfalls, real anxiety about what the next month holds, your nervous system is not at rest. It is on alert. And when an alert system is asked to picture something it desperately needs, it does not experience imagination. It experiences absence. The gap between here and there becomes the loudest thing in the room. This is what the open hand motif actually reveals. An open hand can receive. But a hand that is straining, reaching, extended to its absolute limit and trembling with effort, that hand is also technically open. It is doing the same physical shape, but it is not the same thing. One is stillness, the other is 𝗓𝗢𝗧𝗔𝗡. Soon, we will reach an idea about desire itself, about whether wanting is something you eliminate or something you redirect that pushes directly against the usual belief. After that clicks, it changes how you act on a daily basis. But right now, stay here. Revisit the shape of your life before these last 3 years unfolded, as it really was, not in terms of what you owned or what you earned. Think about how you felt about money when you woke up in the morning. Was there a heaviness before you even looked at your phone? A low-grade calculation running in the background, even on good days? If you have been doing affirmations, journaling your goals, visualizing your future, ask yourself whether that heaviness got lighter, or whether it just got dressed in different language. Whether you started saying, "I am abundant," while still feeling the same tightness in your chest when an unexpected bill arrived. That tightness is the signal. This book calls it the desperation frequency. And the cruel thing about it is that it is not a character flaw. It is a mechanical response to being told to want something you have been trained to need. There is a difference between want and need that most financial and spiritual advice blurs entirely. Need has urgency. Need has survival attached to it. Need sends out a quality of attention that is focused and pressurized and contracted. And whether you believe in energetics or not, you almost certainly know from experience that people who are desperate for a job, a sale, a relationship, a favor almost always get it less easily than people who seem indifferent. That is not a mystery. Desperation changes how you speak, how you listen, what you notice, what you do not. It narrows you. And a narrow person cannot receive what a wide-open one can. Daily affirmations, for someone living inside genuine scarcity, do not reduce need. They rehearse it. You are standing in front of a mirror saying, "Money flows to me easily and freely," while every cell in your body knows the rent is due Thursday and the number in your account is not going to change before then. The affirmation does not land as truth. It lands as contrast. And contrast in that state is pain. Vision boards do something even more specific. They curate desire. They make it precise and beautiful and organized. They give lack a face. If your board has a picture of a house you cannot afford, you have not brought the house closer. You have measured the distance between you and it in pixels, and pinned it where you can see it every morning while you make your coffee. None of this is said to make you feel that you have been foolish. The people who built these practices were often sincere. Some of them found real results, but they found those results in conditions that were already different from yours. The magnet metaphor matters here. Two magnets of the same polarity do not attract each other. They push away. When a person broadcasting need tries to draw in an outcome that requires a frequency of certainty, the poles are mismatched. The push happens invisibly, at the level of every small decision made from panic rather than clarity. The revelation is not that visualization is useless. The revelation is that visualization practiced from need is an amplifier of the wrong signal. The principle is mechanical, not spiritual. You cannot broadcast lack and receive fullness. You cannot grip your open hand and call it open. What 𝗡𝗢𝗧 eventually discovered was not a better vision board. It was a single, quiet question she started asking herself every morning before she reached for her journal. Not "what do I want?" Not "what am I grateful for?" Something simpler. Something that temporarily interrupted the need loop entirely. But that question belongs to a later chapter, when the ground has been prepared for it. For now, the thing to hold is this. The advice that was supposed to relieve your wanting made you a more sophisticated wanter. And sophistication in the wrong direction is still the wrong direction. What would it feel like to want nothing from tomorrow and still move toward it? Chapter 3. Detachment is not indifference, it is mastery. Caring deeply about something and needing it desperately are not the same thing. Confusing them is costing you more than you know. That sounds like a distinction for a philosophy class, not a conversation about money and real life. But stay with it. The space between caring and needing is exactly where most people's financial lives stall, quietly, repeatedly, without them ever understanding why. You want the thing. You work for the thing. You think about the thing at 3 in the morning. And somehow it stays just out of reach. This chapter explains the mechanism behind that experience. More importantly, it names the internal state that ends it, not by making you care less, by making you care from somewhere entirely different. That question from the last chapter is still floating in the air. What would it feel like to want nothing from tomorrow and still move toward it? The answer is not resignation. It is not numbness. It is not the hollow calm of someone who has stopped caring whether they win. Hold on to that question. By the end of this chapter, you will not just understand the answer. You will recognize it as something you have already felt briefly without ever having a name for it. First, let us clear the ground. Detachment has a reputation problem. When most people hear the word, they picture someone sitting cross-legged on a cushion, unmoved by the world. Or they picture a person who has been hurt so many times that they have simply stopped expecting good things. Either way, the image is one of distance, of absence, of someone who has quietly given up and dressed the giving up in spiritual language. That is not detachment. That is avoidance wearing a calm face. There is a name for what those people are doing, and it is not mastery. It is spiritual bypassing, using elevated-sounding ideas to sidestep real emotional engagement. You will recognize it when someone says they have let go of something while their jaw is tight and their eyes say they are still holding on with both hands. The words are detachment. The body is gripping. This matters. If you chase the wrong version of detachment, you end up nowhere. You suppress the desire rather than transcending it. You perform calm instead of inhabiting it. And desire compressed does not disappear. It goes underground and starts pulling strings from below the surface. You end up more desperate, not less. Think about a time you tried very hard not to want something. Maybe a relationship you knew was wrong. Maybe a job offer that seemed just out of reach. Did trying not to want it actually release the wanting? For most people, the answer is no. Telling yourself to stop caring is like telling yourself not to think about a red door. The instruction contains the image. Suppression is not the path. Let that be clear. Now here is where it gets interesting. The opposite of suppression is not indulgence. You do not escape the trap of needing something by obsessing over it more skillfully. The trap has two sides and both of them close around you the same way. One side is suppression, forcing yourself not to feel what you feel. The other is fixation, looping the want until it becomes an identity. Neither of those is detachment. Both are forms of gripping. Here is the image that will stay with you. Imagine an open hand. Not limp, not dead, an open hand, deliberate, engaged, alive. Now imagine that same hand closed into a fist around something you are terrified to lose. Feel the difference in the muscles of your forearm. The open hand can receive. The closed fist cannot. It is already occupied. It is doing one job, and that job is holding on. Everything that arrives at a clenched fist has nowhere to go. This is not a metaphor about your feelings. It is a description of how you move through the world when you need a specific outcome in order to feel okay. When your sense of safety, your sense of worth, your sense of being someone who is doing fine, all of it sitting in one basket, one number, one yes from someone with the power to change your situation, your whole system tightens around that outcome like a fist. And the tighter the fist, the less room anything has to arrive. The desperation frequency is what happens inside that fist. It is the signal you send when you need something rather than choosing it. And it changes everything, not mystically, but practically. The way you speak changes, the pace of your sentences, the hesitation before you name your price, the slight over-explanation that happens when you feel you have to justify why you deserve something, the way you follow up twice when once would have been enough, the way you say yes to the wrong thing because you could not afford to wait for the right one. People feel desperation before they can name it. Opportunities do not wait around in rooms full of it. Now here is what detachment actually is. Detachment is not caring less. It is caring from a place so complete that the outcome becomes a preference rather than a requirement. Listen to that again. A preference versus a requirement. When something is a preference, you move toward it with your full effort, your full attention, your full intention. If it arrives, you receive it. If something else arrives instead, you are still whole. Your sense of yourself was never stored inside the outcome. That is not cold. That is not indifferent. That is someone who has already done the internal work of knowing who they are without needing external confirmation. Here is a story about a woman named Clara. Clara spent 3 years trying to open a restaurant. She had the concept, the menu, the math on the lease. She had told people about it at every dinner party, every family gathering, every casual conversation where someone asked what she was doing with her life. It became the thing she was. Not Clara who loves food and wants to build something. Clara who is waiting for the restaurant to happen. Every investor meeting she walked into, she needed them to say yes. She needed it so badly she could hear it in her own voice, that slight pitch of urgency, making every conversation feel like a performance review she could not afford to fail. She got rejected 11 times in 18 months. Then something shifted, not in her circumstances, in her. She stopped telling people about the restaurant at dinner parties, not because she stopped caring, but because she realized she had been using other people's interests to keep the dream alive inside herself. When she stopped doing that, she had to hold the vision alone, quietly, without applause. And in that quiet, she discovered she still wanted it, not the version other people found exciting. The actual thing, the kitchen at 6 in the morning, the menu she had rewritten 40 times. She walked into meeting number 12 carrying none of what she had carried before. She was not performing certainty. She had it. The investor said yes inside the first 20 minutes. He later told a colleague that she was the first person he had met who seemed like she could take the money or leave it. That was exactly why he gave it. Clara did not care less. She cared from somewhere the rejection could not reach. Call up the shape of your life before these last 3 years unfolded as it really was. The thing you wanted then with that particular desperate energy. The checking of your phone. The lying awake running scenarios. Did the desperateness of the wanting make it arrive faster? Or did it arrive the moment you released the grip? The moment you got busy with something else? The moment you finally said, fine, I will build something anyway? Most people have one version of this story somewhere in their own past. They just have not connected it to the principle underneath it. Here is the mechanical truth behind Clara's story. Detachment does not mean the outcome does not matter. It means you are not using the outcome to manage your nervous system. When you stop doing that, you stop behaving in the ways that signal need. You stop over-explaining. You stop underpricing. You stop shrinking. You stop waiting for someone else to tell you that you and your work are real. And the moment you stop doing those things, you become someone that other people want to say yes to. The open hand is not passive. An open hand can move. It can reach, it can work, it can build. It is simply not occupied by the desperate work of holding on. That is the difference. Motion versus grip. Action versus fear-driven reaction. Later on, we will reach an idea about the role of emotion in financial decisions that pushes directly against the usual belief. Once you grasp that turn, it changes how you act every time real money is on the table. But for now, let this settle. Detachment is not a feeling you perform. It is a position you build slowly, through the repeated practice of knowing that your worth exists prior to any outcome. That your direction is set regardless of whether any single door opens. That your hand is open not because you do not care what lands in it, but because you care enough to let it arrive on its own terms. The clenched fist never receives. The open hand already has. Chapter 4. Need is a frequency wealth cannot tune into. Something is leaving you right now, and it is not money. It is access. Every interaction you have while carrying the weight of financial need sends a signal before you speak a single word. Every pitch you make with desperation in your chest. Every conversation you enter hoping the other person will be your solution. That signal closes doors. Quietly. Consistently. It closes them in job interviews, in negotiations, in the moment a potential investor is deciding whether to take your call. The cost of sending that signal is not measured in dollars lost this week. It compounds. Every connection that does not form, every opportunity that diverts towards someone else, every relationship that never deepens, those are the real costs. They accumulate in silence. The way interest does, the way rust does, the way time does when you are not watching. The question is not whether this is happening to you. The question is why, and the answer lives just below where advice usually reaches. Here is the thing about the open hand the last chapter left you with. The image is true, but it is incomplete. The open hand is not just a posture. It is a broadcast. And everything around you, every person, every system, every opportunity with any intelligence in it, is receiving that broadcast and making a decision about you before you have said a word. Think about a radio frequency, not as a metaphor, not as a spiritual concept, but as a mechanical fact. A radio transmitter sends a signal at a specific frequency. Receivers tuned to a different frequency do not receive that signal. They do not refuse it. They do not reject it. They simply cannot detect it. The signal passes through them as though it were nothing at all. No conflict, no drama, just incompatibility at the level of physics. Need is a frequency. And wealth, the people who carry it, the structures that generate it, the opportunities that create it, is tuned to a different channel entirely. This is not mystical. This is behavioral science dressed in plain clothes. Here is the open loop you should hold through the rest of this chapter. There is a specific moment, a precise behavioral turning point, where a person who carries need stops triggering avoidance and starts triggering attraction instead. That turning point is not what you think it is. Hold that question. By the time this chapter ends, you will see it clearly. Researchers who study social signaling in high-stakes environments, negotiation rooms, hiring panels, investment meetings, have documented something consistent and uncomfortable. People in positions of resource are exquisitely sensitive to desperation signals, not because they are cruel, because they are calibrated by experience. A person who needs the deal too much is, statistically, a higher risk. They are more likely to overpromise, more likely to underdeliver, more likely to disappear under pressure. The need itself becomes evidence of fragility. And fragility in a high-stakes context is something the resourced person has learned to avoid. This is not personal. That matters. Say it again in your own mind. This is not personal. The person across the table is not responding to you. They are responding to your frequency. If that frequency is broadcasting need, they are responding to risk signals their nervous system has been trained to avoid. You could be talented, qualified, even visionary. None of that overwrites the frequency. The frequency arrives first. There is a woman named 𝗓𝗏 who spent 3 years trying to build a consulting practice. She was skilled. Her results for clients were real and documented. But every sales conversation she entered desperate. She had bills she could not stop thinking about, a lease renewal coming up, a number in her head that she needed every potential client to become, and potential clients could feel it, not consciously most of the time, but they would hesitate. They would say they needed to think about it. They would go quiet after the meeting and never follow up. 𝗓𝗏 assumed the problem was her pricing or her positioning or the industry she was in. She adjusted all 3 multiple times. Nothing shifted. The problem was not her offer. The problem was the signal she was sending while she made it. She was transmitting at the frequency of someone who needed the yes more than she believed in the value she was offering. And every resourced person across from her picked that up and quietly moved on. 𝗓𝗏's story does not end there, but hold it for now. What is it exactly that the need frequency broadcasts? It is not one thing. It is a cluster of signals, each one feeding the next. First, it broadcasts scarcity, not just about money, but about options. When you need someone to say yes, you are also implying that you do not have other yeses available. And a person with resources is almost always more attracted to someone with options than someone without. Second, it broadcasts urgency that belongs to you and not to them. Your urgency is your problem, not their opportunity. When your urgency bleeds into the interaction, it makes the other person feel pressure they did not ask to feel. Pressure, in most humans, triggers a pullback reflex. Third, and this one is the quietest, need broadcasts that you have evaluated the relationship before it has had a chance to form. You have already decided this person is your solution. That pre-evaluation, that transactional posture, is something people feel. It makes them feel like a means to an end. And people do not move toward people who make them feel that way. They move away. This is why the magnet metaphor matters. A magnet does not chase. A magnet does not lean forward and strain. A magnet simply holds its charge, and the things that are meant to come to it come. The need frequency is the opposite of a magnetic field. It is a repellent field. It does not drive things away through force. It drives them away through incompatibility. The resourced person, the opportunity, the investor, they do not decide against you consciously. They just find, almost inexplicably, that they are more drawn to someone else. Now pause here. Think about the last time you entered a high-stakes conversation carrying something you really needed from it. A job interview, maybe. A loan application. A pitch to someone whose opinion mattered to your financial life. What were you carrying when you walked into that room? What was in your chest? What were you hoping they would not see? Because that thing you were afraid to let them see was showing anyway, not because you were careless. Because need is not something you can fully hide. It emits. The question this raises is not how to pretend you do not have needs. That is performance. Performance fails because it is still rooted in the need, just with a mask over it. Sophisticated people, the kind with the resources you want access to, see through performance quickly. They have seen it too many times. The real question is deeper. How does a person who genuinely, legitimately has financial needs stop broadcasting at the need frequency? How do you change the signal when the pressure is real? This is where almost every conversation about manifestation and attraction goes wrong. They tell you to fake the feeling. They tell you to act as if. But acting as if while the need is still screaming underneath is a recipe for a very particular kind of exhaustion, the exhaustion of managing the gap between what you show and what you feel. The actual mechanism is different, and here is where 𝗜𝗧𝗧 comes back. 𝗜𝗧𝗧 did not fix her consulting practice by getting more confident. She fixed it by getting more specific. She stopped trying to win every client and started deciding which clients she actually wanted. She built a short list, not of the clients most likely to say yes, but of the clients she was most uniquely equipped to serve well. That specificity changed her frequency. When you have criteria, when you have standards, when you are willing to walk away from a misaligned yes, your entire nervous system knows it. And that knowing broadcasts. It broadcasts competence. It broadcasts options. It broadcasts that you are a person choosing your work rather than a person hoping for work. The signals reversed, not because her financial situation changed overnight. It did not, but because her internal relationship to the outcome changed first. Within 8 weeks, 3 of the clients she had been chasing for months came back. One of them called her. She had stopped following up and they noticed. Detachment is not indifference. It is not performed casualness. It is the genuine internal state of a person who has criteria, who has standards, who knows what they are worth and is willing to wait for the environment to confirm it. That state produces a frequency. And that frequency, unlike the need signal, is one that wealth-bearing systems of people, markets, opportunities are tuned to receive. As this book keeps moving, we will reach an idea about persistence that pushes directly against the usual belief. About how relentlessly showing up for a goal is what makes it arrive. When that point settles, it changes how you act. For now, here is the loop closed. The behavioral turning point, the precise moment where a person stops triggering avoidance and starts triggering attraction, is not the moment they get more confident. It is the moment they become genuinely willing to let the wrong thing go. That willingness is not weakness. It is the clearest possible signal that they carry options. And options in every social and financial ecosystem are the currency that buys access to more options. The need frequency and the frequency of wealth are not just different. They are incompatible. You cannot broadcast both at once. What are you still holding onto that your grip is telling the world you cannot afford to lose? Chapter 5. The Paradox That Cannot Be Faked. Performing detachment makes you more desperate, not less. That sounds like a trap someone laid for you, and it is, but you laid it for yourself. Every time you consciously act unbothered to get a result, you are confessing loudly that you are still bothered, and that confession travels further than your performance does. Here is why this matters right now. You have probably already tried it. You heard what came before this chapter, and something in you said, yes, detachment, I can do that. Then you walked into your day carrying detachment like a tool you were hoping to swing. You were calmer on the surface. You said you did not need the outcome. You may have even convinced yourself for an hour or two, but underneath, the grip was still there. The wanting was not gone. It had just put on a coat. This chapter is about why that does not work, not to discourage you, to free you. Because the moment you understand why performance fails, you stop needing to perform. And that understanding right there is actually the beginning of the real thing. So stay here for a moment. There is a question buried in this chapter. You will not find it for a while, but by the time you do, it will answer something you have been asking since before you picked up this book. Think about a man named Theo, 31 years old, graphic designer, renting a 1-bedroom apartment in a mid-sized city where the rent had gone up twice in 14 months. Theo was not failing exactly, but he was not moving either. He had read the right things, followed the right accounts, built a small freelance clientele on top of his day job. He knew the language of detachment. He had heard the principle, and one Thursday morning he decided to try it. He woke up and told himself he did not need any new clients. He made his coffee without checking his email. He went to the gym. He came back and sat down to work with what he described to a friend later as peaceful non-attachment. He sent 2 proposals that afternoon with, in his words, 0 emotional investment. Then he waited. He waited that evening. He waited the next morning. He refreshed his inbox with the casual, unhurried energy of someone who absolutely did not care. By Friday afternoon, both clients had gone quiet. Theo was sitting at his desk doing the deep breathing of a man who was furious about something he had decided not to be furious about. The performance collapsed, not because the universe punished him for trying, because the performance was never detachment. It was desire in a costume, and it behaved exactly the way desire behaves when it is pretending, tightly, watchfully, hungry for confirmation that the act is working. Here is the part most people miss. Theo did not fail because he wanted the clients. Wanting them was fine. Wanting things is not the problem and never has been. Theo failed because his wanting had a quality to it, a texture, a frequency. It was a wanting that said, without those clients, something about my situation is wrong and I need them to fix it. That signal moved through every word of those proposals. It was in the subject line. It was in the follow-up he almost sent but stopped himself from sending, which is itself a form of sending because the impulse was the signal. The magnet and the need. Remember that image. A magnet does not reach for iron. It does not strain toward the thing it attracts. It simply holds a charge, and the charge does the work. The moment a magnet starts straining, it is no longer functioning as a magnet. It is functioning as a hand, and a grasping hand does not attract, it grabs. And grabbing tells everything around it that there is scarcity in the grip. You cannot fake the magnet, not for long. This is why the detachment paradox has a built-in authenticity test, and the test is brutal. Every person who hears the principle and immediately tries to use it as a strategy is using it wrong, not because strategy is bad, because the paradox is not a strategy. It is a description of a state. You do not implement a state. You arrive at one. Return to your financial footing back then and look only at the money side. Think about the specific feeling you carried into conversations about money or opportunity or your career. Was it open or was it tight? Did you walk into rooms hoping something would finally go right, or did you walk in knowing you were fine either way? You do not need to answer out loud, but sit with that for a moment. Because the difference between those 2 ways of moving through the world is not philosophical. It is measurable. People read it. Opportunities read it. The whole system reads it and it responds accordingly. Theo's story does not end at Friday afternoon. 3 weeks later, a former client reached out to him unprompted. She had a large project, a referral attached, and a timeline flexible enough to work around his schedule. He had not contacted her. He had not been thinking about her particularly. In the weeks since his failed performance, he had done something different. Not intentionally, but because the exhaustion of performing had finally worn him down to something quieter. He had stopped checking, not as a strategy, because he was tired of checking. He had picked up a personal project he had abandoned 2 years ago, something he made not because anyone was paying for it, but because he liked making it. He was, for the first time in a long time, doing work for the sensation of the work. And in that state, unguarded, occupied, genuinely present, the contact came. Now, here is what you cannot do with that story. You cannot hear it and immediately go start a personal project as a magnet technique. That is Theo on Thursday morning again. That is desire in a different costume. The project only worked as a reset because Theo was not using it to get anything. The moment you use rest as a tool to attract results, the rest becomes labor, and the signal goes back to scarcity. This is the trap, and it is a useful one because the only way out is genuine. Detachment is not a behavior you perform. It is a conclusion you reach. Specifically, it is the conclusion that you are already enough, that your life is already workable, that the outcome you want would be wonderful, but its absence does not make you broken. That conclusion cannot be faked because it lives in the body, not in the schedule. You feel it in how you breathe before you send an email. You feel it in whether you can fall asleep the night before something important. You feel it in how long you can go without checking, not because you are disciplined, but because you genuinely feel no emergency. Most people have never reached that conclusion. Not because they are spiritually underdeveloped or doing something wrong, because the culture around money is built on the premise that urgency is responsible, that wanting more, needing more, pushing harder is the correct moral posture when things are not yet where they should be. And so you have been told in 100 different ways that to relax your grip is to give up, that to stop straining is to stop caring, that detachment is something people say when they do not want to do the work. It is not. Detachment is the state from which the best work gets done, because the work is no longer contaminated by the signal of need. It is clean effort. It is action that does not beg. Now close that loop you have been carrying since the opening of this chapter. The question buried in these pages was not about Theo. It was about the moment you read chapter 3 and said to yourself, I can do this. And then, somewhere in the next 48 hours, you did what Theo did, because you probably did. Most people do. It is the natural first response to hearing a principle that sounds liberating. You reach for it. And the reaching is the very thing the principle says to stop doing. But here is what that reaching tells you. It tells you where you still have work to do. Not as a failure, as a map. The thing you reached for hardest, the thing you performed detachment around, the area of your life where the performance lasted the shortest time before it cracked, that is exactly where your signal is loudest. That is where the frequency of need is broadcasting. And that is where, when you finally arrive at genuine detachment, the change will be most visible and most fast. The open hand is not a performance of openness. It is a hand that has genuinely released what it was holding. You can tell the difference between those two things. So can everyone who touches it. You cannot perform your way into a state, but you can work your way there honestly. You can look at the grip and name it. You can examine what the grip is protecting. You can ask whether the thing you are holding so tightly actually needs to be held at all, or whether the holding itself is the problem. In a later section, we will reach an idea about desire, the idea that wanting something fiercely is what drives you toward it, that pushes directly against the usual belief. After that really registers, it changes not just how you think, but how you act on an ordinary Tuesday. For now, sit with this. The detachment paradox cannot be faked, not because of some mystical rule, but because the mind that is faking it is still a mind in need. And a mind in need broadcasts need. You do not perform the frequency. You become it. What would you stop performing if you believed the real thing was actually available to you? Chapter 6. What you already have is the access code. Something is draining from your life right now, and it is not money. It is possibility. Every week you spend in the frequency of not enough, scanning your account, feeling the low-grade hum of lack, performing confidence you do not feel, that week does not simply pass. It compounds. The deals you did not pursue because the desperation in your chest made you hesitate. The connections you did not deepen because you were too preoccupied with what you still lacked. The clarity you could not access because your nervous system was already firing in emergency mode. This is not a character flaw. It is a mechanical problem, and the mechanism causing it is invisible to almost everyone who suffers from it. You have been told to want more, visualize more, hustle harder toward more. But not one person told you that the signal you're wanting broadcasts is the very thing blocking the reception. That changes today, not with a technique, with a recognition. That question at the end of the last chapter is still moving through you. What would you stop performing if you believed the real thing was actually available to you? Hold that for a moment, because the answer is not somewhere in your future. It is already in this room, this day, this body, this life, and you have been walking past it like a person walking past water while describing how thirsty they are. Here is something almost no one admits. The pursuit of more is often, at its core, a story about less, not a story about what you want to build. A story about what you are afraid you do not already have. And that story, told silently daily in the background of every decision, is not neutral. It shapes the way you enter a room. It shapes the way you ask for things. It shapes the way you hold opportunity when it finally arrives. Desperation has a texture. You know this. You have felt it in someone else's pitch, someone else's ask, someone else's too eager follow-up, and something in you pulled back without knowing exactly why. The signal was clear even if the words were polished. That is the magnet working in reverse. Need repels. Not because the universe has opinions about your desire, but because need-based behavior, the hesitation, the over-explaining, the grip that is a little too tight, structurally undermines the thing it reaches for. Here is the question that will open something in this chapter. Why do some people seem to attract resources, opportunities, and the right people without obvious effort, while others with equal or greater talent work furiously and watch the same things pass them by? That question deserves a real answer, not a motivational one, a mechanical one. Sit with it for now. The answer is coming, but only after you see something else first. There was a woman named 𝗓𝗢𝗧𝗔𝗡 who spent 3 years building a consulting practice. She was talented, genuinely talented, and the few clients she had always rehired her. But growing beyond that small circle felt impossible. She would get on calls with potential new clients and something would shift in her voice. A slight urgency, a careful overpreparation that communicated more anxiety than expertise. She knew this. She could feel it happening. And so she worked harder on her pitch, rehearsed more, studied persuasion techniques and pricing psychology. None of it moved the needle. One evening, her landlord knocked on her door to ask about a noise complaint from downstairs. They ended up talking in the hallway for 40 minutes. She talked about her work the way she talked about it when she did not think she was selling it, loose and curious and genuinely interested. Her landlord called her 2 days later. His company needed exactly what she did. Within 4 months, that one contract had tripled her income and led to 3 referrals. 𝗓𝗢𝗧𝗔𝗡 did not change her skills. She did not upgrade her pitch. She stopped performing them. Take a breath after that, because the story is not really about 𝗓𝗢𝗧𝗔𝗡. It is about what she was carrying into every sales call that she was not carrying into that hallway conversation. In the hallway, she already felt like enough. She was not reaching. She was not broadcasting need. She was simply present, and that presence had a quality that no rehearsed pitch can replicate. Now here is the mechanism. Detachment, real detachment, not the performed kind, not the pretend I don't care kind, grows from one source. Genuine sufficiency. You cannot release what you do not believe you already have enough of. That is not a metaphysical claim. It is a behavioral one. The body that believes it is starving will not open its hands. The mind that believes it is desperate will not project calm authority. The person who truly has no evidence of their own enoughness will always, in the critical moment, grip too hard. And this is where something gets difficult. When most people hear the word sufficiency, they immediately think of gratitude lists. Generic, vague, slightly performative exercises that ask you to remember you are grateful for your health and your family. You dutifully think yes, and then you go back to feeling the exact same dread about your bank account. That is not what this is. That is spiritual cosmetics applied to the surface, never absorbed. What changes things is not pretend gratitude. It is located truth. Bring to mind the shape of your life before these last 3 years unfolded as it really was. Not where you wished you were, where you actually were. What did you not know how to do then that you can do now? What did you not have then that exists in your life right now, however imperfectly? Not the life you dream about, the one you are actually living. Look at it honestly. Here is a practice, not a meditation, not a ritual, a scan. 4 categories, and you are going to move through each one with a specific question. Shelter. Not ideal shelter, not the apartment you wish you had, the space you actually occupy right now. Does it keep weather off you? Does it give you a place to think? Can you return to it tonight? If the answer to any of those is yes, your nervous system can register that as real. It is real. This is not about being satisfied with less than you deserve. It is about letting your body know concretely that you are not in emergency. Your body does not know the difference between financial anxiety and physical danger. When you are in the frequency of lack, your nervous system fires the same way it would if you were genuinely unsafe. The scan interrupts that signal with evidence. Connection. Name one person who knows you, not your reputation, not your performance, just you, and would answer your call today. One is enough for this scan, not a crowd. One real connection is not nothing. It is not a small thing. It is structural proof that you exist in relationship, that you are not navigating this alone, that the world contains people who register your presence as valuable. Let that be true. Let your body know it. Competence. Name one thing you can do that someone else cannot do as well, not perfectly, not world-class, just better. A specific skill, a kind of thinking, a way you explain things or build things or see problems. You have this. Everyone does, and you do. The person who feels behind often feels behind across every dimension, but that feeling is almost never accurate. There is something you carry. Identify it. Locate it in your body as a fact, not an affirmation. Resources. This is the category people rush past when they feel financially stressed. But resources are not only money. They are also time, access, knowledge, the tools you already own, the platforms you can use for free, the experience that lives in your history. What do you already have access to that you have not fully used? Not what you wish you had. What is actually there? This scan is not designed to make you feel artificially better. It is designed to give your nervous system real evidence that you are not in freefall. Detachment, the quality that opens the hand, the quality that makes the magnet work in your direction, cannot live in a body that believes it is genuinely at risk. You have to give it somewhere to stand. And now back to the question from earlier. Why do some people seem to attract resources without obvious effort? Here is the answer. They are not doing something special in the moment of attraction. They did something earlier. They stopped building their identity on the gap between where they are and where they want to be, and started building it on the ground beneath their feet. They found real sufficiency, not performed contentment, not suppressed desire, and that sufficiency gave them a quality of presence that operates differently in the world. The person who does not need this particular deal to survive approaches it with open hands. The person who needs it to survive grips, and the grip is visible, and the other person feels it and steps back. This is not mystical. This is human. People extend opportunity toward people who appear to have solid ground under them, because solid ground is contagious and precariousness is too. The open hand held, not gripped, that image keeps returning through this book because it is exact. It is not a passive hand. It is not an empty hand. It is a hand that holds things loosely because it trusts that letting one thing go does not mean losing everything. That trust is not a mental exercise. It is built from evidence. Evidence you locate, not invent. Before long, we will reach an idea about desire that pushes directly against the usual belief. Once that becomes real to you, it changes how you act in every negotiation, every pitch, every moment when something you want is also watching to see how much you need it. But before that can land, this has to be in place. The scan, the located truth. The body that knows it is not in free fall, because detachment is not the absence of want. It is the presence of ground, and you cannot walk forward from a place you refuse to stand in. Chapter 7. The magnet was never the one reaching. Desperation is not an emotion. It is a signal. Whatever you want most in life, desperation is broadcasting that you do not yet have it loudly, constantly, to every room you enter and every decision you make. That sounds like an argument against hope. It is not. It is an observation about why the person who needs the deal the most is almost never the one who gets it, and why the person who could take it or leave it walks out with terms that seem almost unfair. There is a mechanical reason for this. The magnet does not reach. The magnet does not chase the metal across the table. The magnet simply is what it is, dense enough, structured enough, certain enough, and the metal moves on its own. You have been taught your whole life that wanting more, working harder, and pushing further is the path. This chapter is going to show you that the path runs in exactly the opposite direction. Stand in the place you are. That is where Chapter 6 left you. You cannot walk forward from a place you refuse to stand in. This chapter begins right there, in the exact spot where most people decide the situation is too uncomfortable to stay. So they reach, they grasp, they push. And in doing so, they become the one thing a magnet can never be and still function. They become the thing that is chasing. Here is the question worth sitting with for the next few minutes. Why do some people seem to draw opportunity without visibly pursuing it, while others who are working twice as hard seem to repel the very thing they are working toward? Hold that question. Do not answer it yet. The answer is coming, and when it arrives, it will not be the answer you expect. Think about someone you have met, not famous, just someone in your orbit who always seemed to have something going on. A project, a deal, an interesting conversation with the right person. They were not necessarily the loudest in the room. They were not always the most visibly ambitious. But things came to them. Introductions happened naturally. People wanted to include them, and you probably noticed, without fully naming it, that they were not particularly nervous about any of it. They held the whole thing loosely. Open hand, not clenched fist, and the more loosely they held it, the more it seemed to stay. That person was operating at a different density. Marcus ran a small painting business in a city where 3 larger outfits had most of the commercial contracts. He had been working for 11 years, kept his crew steady, and did decent residential work. He was not struggling, but he was not growing either. Every time a larger contract came up, he would drive himself half-mad preparing the bid, checking numbers at 2 in the morning, rehearsing his pitch, telling himself this was the one. He needed it to be the one. You could hear it in how he talked about each opportunity. He would mention the bid to anyone who would listen. His whole posture in the meeting room communicated a single thing: I need this to go well. And it almost never did. One winter, a pipe burst in a building he had painted 3 years before. He went to assess the water damage as a favor, no bid, no contract, no angle, just to help someone he knew. The property manager who was there had 3 other buildings. By the time Marcus left that afternoon, he had been asked to bid on all 3, on terms he had been chasing for years. He had not prepared a pitch. He had no presentation. He simply showed up as a person who knew what he was doing and did not need anything from that afternoon except to be useful. He was dense with competence and loose on outcome. The metal moved to the magnet. What changed was not his skill. His skill had been the same for years. What changed was his signal. Most of us have been told that the way to get more is to want more. Want it badly enough and you will find a way. There is partial truth in that. Desire activates. But desire without identity to back it up becomes a frequency that broadcasts the gap between where you are and where you want to be. It announces the lack. It signals the need. And need, as a signal, has a specific and reliable effect on other people. They feel the weight of your wanting. They sense that this interaction carries pressure. And pressure, almost universally, makes people want to step back. The desperation frequency is not a metaphor. It is a behavioral reality. When you need the outcome, you over-explain. You offer too much too fast. You concede before you should. You follow up once too many times. You are not doing this because you are weak. You are doing this because you are human. Urgency produces these behaviors mechanically, but each of those behaviors reduces your density. Each one signals that you are still reaching, and the reaching is visible. So what does it actually mean to increase identity density? Here is the first practice. Decide what you already are before anyone confirms it. This is not a confidence trick. This is a structural shift in how you carry yourself into rooms. The person who walks into a negotiation already knowing they are the kind of person who does good deals does not telegraph need. They are not experiencing need. They are experiencing confirmation of something they already believe to be true about themselves. You do not need the external outcome to prove you are who you say you are. You have already settled that question internally. The metal does not move toward the magnet because the magnet is trying. The metal moves because the magnet has already decided what it is. Practice this in small contexts first. The coffee order. The conversation with a colleague. The email you send at the end of a workday. Begin inhabiting the version of yourself who is already where you are trying to go, and inhabit it in moments that seem too small to matter. Because the small moments are where the identity gets built, or where it keeps getting eroded. Mirror moment. Travel back to that point 3 years ago, not the version of where you hoped you would be by now, but where you actually were. Think about what you were signaling in that period. Think about whether the thing you wanted most was something you held with an open hand, or whether you were gripping it so tightly that your behavior became strange around it. Then ask whether the things that actually arrived came the way you planned, or whether they came sideways, through doors you were not watching, in the moments when you were busy being yourself rather than being desperate. Most things come in sideways. The magnet does not care which direction the metal approaches from. The second practice is this. Let your work be your loudest signal, not your pitch for your work. The work itself. There is a particular kind of person who is always telling you about what they are building. They have the vision fully rendered in language, and they will describe it to you in detail. And then there is the person who is simply building. The second person has a different density. When they finally speak about what they are doing, The words carry weight because the work is already behind them. Every hour you put into producing something real, something that exists when you are not in the room, is an hour building the kind of density that eventually does not require your presence to continue attracting. Your work is not evidence you present after you have someone's attention. Your work is the thing that generates the attention. Build it first. Describe it later and only briefly. The third practice may be the most counterintuitive of the three. Reduce the number of things you are trying to attract at once. The magnet does not work by expanding its surface area. It works through concentration. When your identity is spread thin, a bit of this project, a bit of that side thing, a bit of this aspiration and that one, your density is dispersed. You become a weak field rather than a strong one. You draw a little of many things and a lot of nothing in particular. Focus is not a productivity concept. Focus is a density concept. The person who has decided, fully and without apology, exactly what they are building and exactly who they are in relation to it, carries a signal that is impossible to ignore. You have probably felt it in the presence of someone like this, not fame, not status, just the unmistakable gravity of someone who knows exactly what they are about. That gravity is not personality. It is the result of accumulated commitment to a single direction over a long enough period of time. Down the line in this book, we will reach an idea about patience that pushes directly against the usual belief. When that idea snaps into focus, it changes how long you are willing to hold a position before you decide it is not working. But for now, come back to the magnet. It was never reaching. It was never strained. It was never broadcasting the distance between itself and what it wanted. It was simply structured, dense, and still. And in that stillness, it was more powerful than any amount of chasing. The desperation frequency repels because it announces a gap. Identity density attracts because it announces an arrival. You are not behind. You have been reaching, and reaching and arriving are not the same direction. Stop reaching. Become denser. The right things are already moving toward you, and the only question now is whether you will be solid enough to receive them when they arrive. Chapter 8. Stop monitoring the outcome, it is already decided. Something is steadily bleeding out of your days right now, and it has nothing to do with your bank account. Every hour you spend refreshing, checking, watching for signs, measuring the distance between where you are and where you want to be, that hour is not neutral. It is not simply time passing while you wait. It is a cost. It is the exact signal your whole system broadcasts to every opportunity moving in your direction. And that signal says one thing: I do not believe this is coming. When something moving toward you receives that signal clearly enough, long enough, it reroutes. This is not a spiritual warning. It is a behavioral fact. The checking itself is the problem, not the desire, not the wanting. Not even the urgency you feel in your chest at 2 a.m. when the numbers don't add up. The mechanism that undoes everything you have built through detachment is much quieter than that, much more ordinary. It is the checking. By the end of this chapter, you will understand exactly why and exactly what to do instead. Here is the question that will drive everything in this chapter. If you had already decided the outcome was certain, would you check on it? Sit with that. Don't answer yet. You spent the last several chapters learning to release your grip. You learned to hold the open hand, to want without clutching, to move towards something without strangling it in transit. You became, as the last chapter put it, denser, more solid, less reactive. That shift was real. The work was real, but there is a trap waiting on the other side of detachment. Almost nobody talks about it because it looks like diligence. It looks like responsibility. It looks honestly like the right thing to do. The trap is monitoring. Go back to the shape of your life before these last 3 years unfolded as it really was. Not in terms of income or circumstances, but in terms of how you spent your mental energy on any given Tuesday. How many minutes did you spend checking something, an account balance, an email thread, a metric, a person's behavior looking for evidence that what you wanted was actually going to happen? How much of your day was spent measuring the gap between where you stood and where you wanted to be? Now ask yourself honestly, did all that checking ever make the thing arrive faster? It didn't, and there is a reason for that. The magnet analogy has come up in this book before. It is worth returning to here with more precision. A magnet does not check whether the metal is approaching. It does not lean toward the thing it attracts and then pull back to verify the distance. It simply holds its field, steadily, without interruption. The pull is continuous precisely because it never lapses into doubt. The moment the magnet begins to question its own pull, it is no longer just a magnet. It is a magnet with a problem. You are the magnet. And every time you check, every time you open the app to see if the number moved, every time you read back through an email thread looking for evidence the deal is progressing, every time you scan someone's face for confirmation that things are going your way, you interrupt the field. You don't destroy it completely, but you disrupt it. Disruption compounds just like loss compounds. One check becomes a habit becomes a frequency. And that frequency is the desperation signal dressed in khakis and a spreadsheet. Here is a woman named 𝗓𝗢𝗧𝗔𝗡, 31 years old. She had spent 8 months building a consulting practice after leaving a job that paid her well but cost her everything else. She had done the inner work. She had released the anxious grip she used to have on client responses, on proposal outcomes, on whether her rate was too high. She felt lighter. She felt for the first time like the work was good and she trusted it. But every morning before coffee, she opened her email. Then she opened her invoicing software to see if anything had been paid. Then she checked her proposal tracker. Then she refreshed her email again. By 8 in the morning, she had checked for evidence of progress 4 times and found none. That finding, that absence would settle into her chest like weight, and she would walk into every call that day carrying that weight, even when she smiled through it. The calls went fine. The proposals were strong. The work was excellent. The deals kept stalling just before they closed. She blamed the economy. She blamed her pricing. She blamed the fact that she was building something new. None of those things were the problem. The problem was that she had detached from the outcome during the work and then checked compulsively during the waiting. The waiting is where the signal lives. The waiting is the field. What you do in the gap between action and arrival is not passive time. It is the active broadcast of your expectation level. And 𝗓𝗢𝗧𝗔𝗡 broadcast every morning before 8 was the same message on repeat. I don't actually believe this is happening. Certainty does not monitor. Read that again slowly in your own mind. Certainty does not monitor. If you were certain your mortgage payment would be there on the 1st of the month, you would not check your account every 4 hours to see if it arrived early. You would simply know. The knowing is not the same as forgetting or being irresponsible. The knowing is a different quality of relationship with the outcome. It is expectation without surveillance. That is what this chapter is asking you to build. Now here is the part where most people resist. They say, but what about accountability? What about staying on top of things? What about the legitimate need to track results and course correct? Those are real things. They are not the same as checking. Checking, as it is used here, is not the scheduled review of data to make informed decisions. Checking is the anxious, reflexive reaching for evidence that you are not being abandoned by the outcome you want. You can feel the difference in your body when you do it. Scheduled review feels like steering. Compulsive checking feels like holding your breath. One is a behavior of someone in control. The other is a behavior of someone afraid they have already lost. This brings us to the 72-hour protocol. Here is what it asks of you. It is simpler than you expect. For 72 hours, you will do 3 things. First, you will take every action that genuinely serves your goal. Send the emails, make the calls, deliver the work, show up fully. Second, once an action is taken, you will not check on its status again until your scheduled review time, which you set in advance. Not when you feel the urge. In advance with an actual time and a specific scope. Third, when the urge to check arrives outside that window, and it will arrive with urgency and with very convincing reasons, you will not suppress it. You will name it. That is the part nobody tells you. You do not push the anxiety down. You do not pretend it isn't there. You speak to it directly inside your own mind and you say, I feel the urge to check because I am not fully certain yet. That is honest. And then you say, the check will not create the certainty. Only the expectation holds the field. The anxiety that rises in the gap is not a warning sign. It is a withdrawal symptom. You have been feeding a checking habit for years, possibly for decades, and the body expects it like any other pattern it has learned to rely on. The anxiety says check again. The anxiety says you might be missing something. The anxiety says this is different from before. This one actually matters just this once. It is not different. The voice is always the same. It is the desperation frequency trying to survive by disguising itself as reasonable concern. What you do with the anxiety is simple but not easy. You let it be present without acting on it. You breathe. You move your attention to the next action within your control, not to suppress the feeling, but to redirect the energy the feeling was about to consume into something that actually serves the goal. The anxiety wants to move through checking. You are redirecting it through doing. By hour 48 of the protocol, something shifts. Not for everyone at the same speed, but reliably for almost everyone who completes the full 72 hours without a break in the rule. The urgency begins to settle, not because the desire is gone, because the expectation has had room to stabilize without being interrupted. The field has had time to hold. You are not waiting passively. You are holding actively. There is a difference that lives in your posture, in the quality of your breath, in the tone of your voice when you talk about what is coming. Now close the loop on the question that opened this chapter. If you had already decided the outcome was certain, would you check on it? No. You would work. You would rest. You would prepare for what comes next. You would hold the open hand not because you had given up on what you wanted, but because the hand is open so the thing can land in it cleanly without you grabbing for it and knocking it off course. A little later, you will come to a point about desire itself, specifically about whether wanting more is ever the right fuel for getting it that pushes directly against the usual belief. Once that lands, it shifts how you act on your clearest goals. But for now, what matters is this. Checking is the vote of no confidence that cancels the detachment signal. Certainty does not monitor. It simply expects. The question for the next chapter is this. What does genuine certainty actually feel like in the body? And how do you know if what you are feeling is real expectation or just a better rehearsed version of hope? Chapter 9. Desire without desperation, the exact calibration. The thing keeping you from what you want is not your lack of desire. It is the texture of the desire itself. That probably sounds like something a person says right before they tell you to stop caring so much. You are already bracing for it. Do not. This is not a lesson in indifference. It is a lesson in precision. There is a version of wanting something that draws it toward you. There is a version that pushes it away with the same force you pour into pursuing it. The difference between those two versions lives entirely in a sensation you can learn to feel. The question the previous chapter left you with was this: what does genuine certainty feel like in the body, and how do you know if what you feel is real expectation or just a better rehearsed version of hope? That question does not have one answer, it has four. By the time this chapter ends, you will know each one well enough to check yourself without thinking. Here is the first thing you need to understand. Desire exists on a dial, not a switch. A dial with a full spectrum from one end to the other. Almost nobody lives at either extreme. You are somewhere in the middle most of the time, drifting without realizing it. That position on the dial determines more about your results than any strategy, plan, or action sequence you have ever tried to follow. Turn that dial too far in one direction and you arrive at cold detachment. You stopped caring. Nothing motivates you and nothing arrives because nothing has any pull. Turn it too far in the other direction and you arrive at desperation. The wanting has become a need. And need broadcasts something that every room you walk into can feel before you open your mouth. Remember the shape of your life before these last 3 years unfolded as it really was. Think about something you wanted so badly it occupied your thoughts every morning before you were fully awake. Think about how you held that thing in your mind. Was it light? Or did it have weight? Did you imagine having it and feel a clean, warm readiness? Or did you imagine not having it and feel a specific dread? That dread is the sensation this chapter is about. It is the signal that you have crossed from desire into desperation. Most people never notice the crossing. It happens gradually, the same way a hand that starts open slowly closes into a fist without you deciding to close it. There is a word that will anchor this chapter. The word is calibration, not elimination, not suppression. Calibration. You are not removing desire from the equation. You are tuning it to the frequency that produces signal instead of noise. Here is where the open loop begins. There is a specific internal experience people describe when something they wanted arrives unexpectedly, or arrives after a long period of finally letting go of the grip. They describe it as feeling like it stopped mattering right before it happened. That phrase is both accurate and dangerously misleading. The reason it is misleading is worth sitting with. But first, you need the 4 sensation markers. The first marker is location. Desperation lives in the chest, specifically the upper chest near the sternum. It produces a tightening that is easy to mistake for motivation because it has urgency inside it. Productive desire lives lower. It settles somewhere around the solar plexus, and it is warm rather than tight. When you think about the outcome you want and you feel a pressure near your throat or your breastbone, that is the signal you are in the need zone. When you think about the same outcome and you feel a settled warmth in the core of the body, you are in the productive zone. These are not metaphors. They are actual physically detectable sensations. Your body does not lie about this. Only your interpretation of those sensations does. The second marker is the quality of the mental image. When you picture the outcome you want, notice what you see. Desperate wanting always pictures the moment of getting, the email arriving, the number in the account, the person saying yes, the door opening. It is obsessed with the arrival because some part of the mind knows arrival is the only thing that will relieve the pressure. Productive desire pictures the life around the outcome, not the moment you get it. The Tuesday afternoon that exists 6 months after you have it, ordinary and quiet and simply different. If your mental image starts and ends with receipt, you are in desperation. If your mental image wanders into the ordinary life that comes after, you are in the productive zone. Claudia was a graphic designer who had been trying to build a client base for 2 years with almost nothing to show for it. She had a spreadsheet, a portfolio, a plan for outreach, and a pitch she had refined 17 times. None of it was working. What she did every morning was open that spreadsheet and stare at the empty rows where client names should be. She pictured landing a client, felt relief, and then went about her day carrying the weight of all the rows still empty. One evening she was sitting on her back porch, and she let herself think about what the work would actually feel like if she had more of it. The specific problem solving she liked. The back and forth with someone who trusted her. The feeling of finishing something and knowing it was good. She was not thinking about the income. She was not thinking about the spreadsheet. She was thinking about the work itself, with something that felt closer to affection than urgency. A client reached out the next morning through a referral she had made 8 months earlier and forgotten about. There is no magic in that sequence. What changed was the quality of her signal. Let that sit for a moment before moving on. The third marker is the behavior around setbacks. This one is the clearest diagnostic of all. When something does not go the way you needed it to go, a deal falls through, an opportunity closes, a number comes back lower than expected, notice how long the recovery takes. Desperation makes setbacks feel like evidence. Evidence that the thing will never arrive, that you were foolish to expect it, that the gap between where you are and where you need to be just got wider. Productive desire makes the same setback feel like information. Just information, neutral and usable. A data point that adjusts the route but does not threaten the destination. Recovery time in desperation is measured in days. Recovery time in the productive zone is measured in hours or less. Not because the person in the productive zone cares less. Because their internal sense of the outcome is not dependent on any single event to confirm it is still possible. You do not need a setback to disappear to know which zone you are in. You can tell just by the story you immediately write about what the setback means. Evidence or information. Those are the two options. Your automatic response tells you where the dial is sitting right now. The fourth marker is the sensation in the open hand. You have heard this image before in this book. The open hand, held not gripped. Here is what that sensation actually is. Place something you want very much inside an imagined hand and let the hand stay open. Notice the urge to close the fingers. That urge is desperation. It is the body's physical analog to the emotional reality of need. Now notice that closing the hand does not make the thing more likely to stay. It makes it more likely to be crushed. Productive desire is the state in which the hand stays open not because you do not care whether the thing stays, but because you have decided the holding matters more than the gripping. You want the outcome. You prefer the outcome. You have done the work that makes the outcome likely. And you have released the requirement that the outcome arrive on a specific schedule to prove you are not failing. This is the truth about that phrase, it stopped mattering right before it happened. It did not stop mattering. What stopped was the requirement. The desire remained. What dissolved was the desperate attachment to a particular timeline as the measure of whether the desire was valid, whether the work was real, whether the person deserved the outcome. That dissolution is not indifference. It is the condition in which a magnet stops pushing and starts pulling. Because a magnet that is straining towards something is not behaving like a magnet. It is behaving like something in need. Here is the close of the loop. The reason people describe things arriving right after they stopped mattering is not that indifference is a spiritual trick that summons results. It is that the behavioral and energetic signal a person emits when they are in genuine preference, rather than need, is fundamentally different. The decisions are cleaner. The communication is more direct. The presence in any room is fuller. And all of those things produce different outcomes. The arrival feels mysterious only because the internal shift is invisible to the person experiencing it. From the outside, it is entirely legible. Further on, you will come to a point about taking action toward a goal that pushes directly against the usual belief. When that becomes clear, it shifts not just how hard you work but why you work, and whether the work itself carries you forward or drains the very certainty you are trying to build. But for now, take the 4 markers: location in the body, quality of the mental image, behavior around setbacks, sensation in the open hand. Run them every morning, not as a ritual of reassurance but as a diagnostic. You are checking the position of the dial. You are not trying to feel a certain way. You are simply observing where you actually are, and then making the smallest possible adjustment toward preference and away from need. The productive desire zone feels like excited preference. It cares about the outcome. It does not require the outcome to feel whole. That is the calibration, and you now know how it feels. Chapter 10. The wealthy have a different relationship with time. Every second you spend feeling behind is costing you more than you know, not in some vague philosophical way, in a precise, mechanical way. The pressure you feel right now, that low hum of not enough time, not enough progress, not enough yet, that pressure is not just uncomfortable. It is actively working against the outcome you want. It is a signal. And that signal is broadcasting something to every decision you make, every room you enter, every opportunity that floats close enough to reach. The signal says, "I am running out," and anything within range of that signal responds accordingly. The question you need to sit with is this: what if the urgency itself is the problem, not your effort, not your intelligence, not even your circumstances? The urgency, that is what this chapter is about. And by the time it ends, you will see time differently, not as something chasing you, as something that has always been willing to cooperate with you if you would stop running from it. That is the calibration, and you now know how it feels. Knowing how it feels is only the beginning, because there is a specific place where the calibration gets tested and tested hard. Almost everyone fails the test without realizing they are even taking it. That place is time, not time management, not productivity. Time itself, the way you hold it, the way you relate to it, the story you carry about how much of it you have, how fast it is moving, and whether it is working for you or against you. Here is something worth noticing. Wealthy people, not just financially successful, but genuinely wealthy in the sustained, compounding, quietly powerful way, move differently through the world. You have probably observed this without naming it. They take long pauses before answering questions. They decline things without apology and without rushing to fill the silence. They make large decisions slowly over weeks, sometimes months. They do not chase. They wait for the right version of a thing rather than grabbing the available version because the clock feels loud. When you watch this behavior up close, it can look like privilege. It can look like they can afford to wait because they already have enough. But that is the wrong sequence. They are not unhurried because they are wealthy. They became wealthy in part because they were unhurried. The temporal identity came first. The material result followed it. Look back at the season you were in before these last 3 years unfolded as it really was. Not what you had or didn't have. Think about how time felt. Did it feel like something you moved through or something that moved through you? Did decisions feel spacious or compressed? Did you carry a sense that there was room for things to unfold, or did you carry a persistent low-grade panic that if you didn't act immediately, the window would close and you would miss everything? Most people who feel financially behind live inside a compressed version of time. Every day that passes without visible progress feels like a day subtracted from an already shrinking total. The result is a particular kind of mental noise, a constant background urgency that masquerades as motivation but functions more like interference. It shortens your horizon. It narrows your choices. It makes you reach for the fast version of things, even when the fast version will cost you more in the long run. This is the open loop you need to hold for a moment. Why does urgency produce worse outcomes, even when the urgency is real? Because urgency is not just a feeling, it is a filter. Every decision you make while you feel urgency gets filtered through one question: what solves this fastest? Not what solves this best. Not what solves this permanently. What solves this now? And the fastest solution is almost never the most effective one. It is the most available one. Most available means most marketed toward people in your exact emotional state, most designed to feel like relief rather than deliver it, most priced to extract rather than build. The urgency filter is a business model for other people. Consider Marlena. She ran a small catering business out of her apartment kitchen, taking weekend bookings and managing everything herself. For 2 years, she worked constantly. She said yes to every inquiry, undercharged because turning down work felt like financial risk, and drove herself to exhaustion trying to fill every open slot in her calendar. She had a persistent sense that the business was one slow month away from disappearing. So she kept the pedal down. More bookings, faster responses, smaller margins, less sleep. Business was busy. She was not building anything. Then her van broke down. She was forced to cancel 3 weeks of bookings while it was repaired. She had no choice but to stop. And in that unwanted pause, something unexpected happened. She raised her prices to cover what she thought would be lost revenue. She responded to inquiries on her own schedule instead of immediately. She said no to 2 low-margin events that would have drained her completely. And she waited to see what happened. 3 clients who had previously felt she was too affordable now perceived her as premium and booked her at the new rate without question. The 2 events she declined freed up her best available weekend, which she used to serve one high-value client who referred 4 others. She had fewer bookings. She made more money. She had not changed her product. She had changed her temporal posture. Marlena did not learn a technique. She accidentally stopped broadcasting urgency, and the results she had been chasing for 2 years arrived inside the space she created by stopping. That story is not about pricing strategy. It is about something deeper. Urgency signals scarcity of time, and scarcity of time is experienced by everyone around you as scarcity in general. When you are urgent, people sense that you need this. And when they sense you need this, the dynamic shifts. Negotiating power moves away from you. Prices hold firm or rise. Opportunities that required your best judgment get decided by your most pressured self. The magnet analogy works here precisely. Need pushes away what it wants to draw close. Urgency is need applied to time, and it operates the same way. Wealthy people know this. Not always consciously. But they have learned through experience, through observation, or through some mentor who said it plainly to them once, that the posture of sufficiency is one of the most powerful negotiating tools available to a human being. The genuine, embodied sense that time is not running out. And here is the thing that makes this harder than it sounds. You cannot fake it. You can try to appear unhurried while internally running, but the appearance without the internal reality is just theater. And people feel the difference even when they cannot name it. The business associate who senses something off in a conversation but can't explain why. The investor who passes on a deal that looked good on paper. The client who books someone slightly less qualified but somehow more settled. They are all responding to the frequency beneath the surface, the signal underneath the performance. This is why the calibration from the previous chapter matters so much, because calibration is not performance. It is the actual internal state. It is the genuine sense that you do not need this particular thing at this particular moment to be okay, even when the thing would genuinely help. It is holding the open hand, not clenched around the outcome, not desperate for it. Available to it, interested in it, working toward it, but not compressed by it. And now the deeper piece. The one most people in this conversation have never heard framed this way. Urgency does not just affect your behavior, it affects your perception. When you operate from time scarcity, you stop seeing long horizon opportunities. Literally stop seeing them. Your brain, prioritizing immediate threat response, filters out information that will not solve the immediate problem. The slow opportunity that would build quietly over 3 years looks invisible when you are scanning for what pays this month. The relationship that would open significant doors in 2 years looks irrelevant when you are calculating this quarter. The skill that would compound across a decade looks like a luxury when you are managing a week. Time-abundant people see a different landscape. Not because they have better information, because they have a longer lens, and the longer lens reveals opportunities that are completely invisible to the person operating under compression. This is the revelation that closes the loop opened earlier. Urgency produces worse outcomes not only because it distorts decisions, it produces worse outcomes because it contracts perception itself. The compressed version of time you carry is not just uncomfortable, it is literally making the world smaller than it is. Soon, you will come to a point about ambition that pushes directly against the usual belief. After that clicks, it shifts how you pursue every goal you have left. But for now, stay with this. The detachment this book has been building toward is not detachment from caring. It is detachment from compression. It is the decision, made and remade daily, to operate from a version of time that cooperates rather than constricts. To be the person in the room who is not in a hurry, not because nothing matters, but because everything worth having is worth approaching with the clarity that only an unhurried mind can access. You are not behind. That feeling of being behind is the signal. And now that you can name the signal, you can choose not to send it. The unhurried decision is almost always the wealthier one. Chapter 11. Release the outcome, keep the identity. Letting go is not the same as giving up. That sounds like a reason to close this chapter before you have even started it. If you have ever been told to stop caring so much, you probably flinch at anything that sounds like surrender. But this is not surrender. Letting go of the outcome while holding something else completely immovable, that is a different operation entirely. Most people who talk about detachment have never made that distinction. They release the goal and wonder why nothing arrives. They grip the goal and wonder why it keeps slipping. The piece they miss sits exactly between those two positions. By the time this chapter ends, you will be able to name it precisely and feel the difference in your own chest. Here is the open question you need to carry into the next several minutes. If the outcome is released, what exactly is being held? Hold that question. The answer is not what you expect. The unhurried decision is almost always the wealthier one. There is something worth slowing down for inside that sentence. Unhurried does not mean passive. Wealthy does not always mean what you have been taught to pursue. Unhurried means the person making the decision no longer needs the outcome to happen in order to feel safe. They have already settled something inside themselves that most people are still trying to settle through external results. That settled thing, that interior anchor, is what this chapter is about. You have probably noticed that some people seem to attract opportunities the way a clean window attracts light. Others seem to push opportunities away the harder they reach. This is not luck. It is not personality. It is a signal. Every action you take carries information about your relationship to what you want. The people and systems around you read that information whether you intend them to or not. Need-based wanting broadcasts at a frequency other people sense in the first 30 seconds of a conversation. It shows up in how you pitch an idea, how you follow up on an email, how you respond when a deal goes quiet. That frequency is the desperation signal. It is the single most reliable repellent for the outcomes you are working toward. Here is the part that stings a little. The harder you have worked, the more certain you are that you deserve the result. And the more certain you feel you deserve it, the stronger the desperation signal becomes. Because now it is not just about money. It is about fairness. It is about whether all that effort meant anything. That emotional cocktail, effort plus fairness plus urgency, is one of the most convincing arguments for gripping harder. And it is precisely what locks the outcome out of reach. Think about a time in your own life, maybe 3 years ago, maybe more, when you wanted something so badly you could feel it in your sleep. Notice how your behavior changed around that thing. Notice how you checked for it, angled toward it, recalculated what you would settle for. Notice whether you got it. And if you did, notice whether the getting of it felt like the relief you expected. Or whether it felt smaller somehow, less certain, because some other version of the same anxiety had already moved on to the next thing before the first one arrived. That is the mirror. Sit with it for a moment before you read another word. Most people try to solve this problem by suppressing the desire. They tell themselves they do not care. They practice detachment the way you practice holding your breath, uncomfortable, forced, unsustainable. And the moment the pressure gets high enough, they gasp and grab for the outcome harder than before. That is not detachment. That is desire wearing a costume. Real detachment does not require that you want less. It requires that you locate the thing you are actually holding. Meet Theo. Theo spent 4 years trying to close a specific deal, a contract with a regional distributor that would have tripled his company's revenue. More importantly, it would have proven something he had been trying to prove since his business partner left and told him the operation was too small to survive. Theo had a number in his mind. He had a timeline. He had a version of himself that only became real when that contract was signed. Every month the deal stayed open, Theo's behavior got a little sharper at the edges, a little more urgent in the room, a little more willing to discount his price, a little more ready to agree to terms that disadvantaged him just to keep the conversation alive. The distributor could feel it. Not because they were sophisticated readers of human psychology, but because need telegraphs itself in the most ordinary ways. Theo answered emails within minutes. He laughed a little too quickly at the buyer's jokes. He offered a lower rate before he was asked. The deal collapsed on a Tuesday afternoon, not dramatically. The distributor simply went quiet and then 3 weeks later sent a polite note about a different direction. Theo was wrecked, but the wreckage did something useful. It cracked open the question he had been avoiding for 4 years. Who was Theo without that contract? If the contract was the proof, what was the identity underneath it? He sat with that question for longer than was comfortable. The answer, when it came, was not a business insight. It was the recognition that he had been trying to use an outcome to construct an identity, instead of letting the identity precede the outcome. He was waiting to become the man who ran a serious business. The serious man was supposed to arrive with the contract attached. 6 months after the deal fell apart, Theo stopped chasing that distributor's equivalent. He got clear on who he was operating as regardless of which contract closed. He made decisions from that place. And the specific outcome he had been white-knuckling for 4 years. It arrived in a different shape, from a different source, for a higher number, without the urgent smell of need anywhere on the agreement. The distributor who finally signed said, during the closing call, that he had been watching Theo for a while. He liked the way Theo seemed unhurried. Theo laughed. Not the quick, accommodating laugh of someone relieved a deal is closing, a real laugh, because he understood what had actually happened. Here is the principle underneath Theo's story. It is the synthesis this entire book has been building toward. Releasing the outcome is only sustainable, it only holds under pressure, it only works when the stakes are high, when it is paired with something fierce on the other side. The fiercer thing is identity. The who is locked. The how and the when are released. This is not a spiritual instruction. It is a structural one. Your identity is the operating system. The outcome is an application running on top of it. When you try to release the outcome while your identity is still undefined or conditional, still waiting to be confirmed by results, you have nothing solid beneath the release. The open hand you are trying to hold becomes a hand that is simply empty, and an empty hand reaches. That is its nature. But when the identity is already decided, when you have settled into who you are as a person who earns at a certain level, who makes decisions from a certain place, who operates by a certain standard regardless of what last month's numbers looked like, then releasing the specific outcome is no longer an act of faith or willpower. It is logical. You are not letting go of yourself. You are only letting go of the particular road you thought you had to take. The magnet does not chase metal. That is the recurring image this book keeps returning to, and here is why it matters most right now. A magnet generates a field. The field is consistent regardless of whether the metal has arrived. The magnet does not become more magnetic out of urgency. It does not alter its field to accommodate whatever happens to be nearby. Its nature is the pull, and the pull is not a performance. It is simply what it is. Your identity works the same way. When it is decided and settled, not performed, not forced, but genuinely inhabited, it generates a field that circumstances arrange themselves around, not because the universe is listening to your affirmations. Because a settled identity produces a particular quality of decision, a particular energy in a room, a particular patience in a negotiation that selects for different outcomes than anxiety selects for. Later on, you will come to a point about confidence that pushes directly against the usual belief. Once you grasp that turn, it shifts how you carry yourself before you have earned the right to. For now, the work is specific. What outcome have you been white-knuckling? Not in a general sense, the actual one, the number, the deal, the title, the relationship that was supposed to confirm something about your worth. You do not need to let it go because you have given up. You need to let it go because you have finally decided who you are with or without it. The how is variable. The when is variable. The alternate route, the different shape the thing arrives in, the source you did not expect, all of that is variable and all of it remains available. What is not variable, what you do not release, is the identity of the person to whom such outcomes belong naturally. That identity is already yours. You are not earning it. You are not waiting for permission to inhabit it. You stepped into it the moment you understood that the wanting was never the problem. The needing was. Close the hand that was grasping. Open it, yes, but know what you are holding. The map is released. The destination is not. Chapter 12. You are no longer waiting to be enough. Every civilization that has ever risen and fallen left behind the same quiet evidence, not in its monuments or its borders, in its people, specifically in the ones who seemed to carry a different frequency than those around them. They were not louder. They were not always richer to begin with, but they moved through scarcity the way water moves through a cracked wall, not by force, but by a kind of settled inevitability. What they possessed was not a technique. It was a location. An interior address that said, "I am already here." Every era has had a handful of people who understood this, and a vast majority who spent their entire lives waiting to feel it. You have been doing the work of this entire book to stop waiting. This chapter is where the waiting ends. The map is released. The destination is not. That line is worth sitting with for one more breath. It holds a distinction that most people collapse into a single confused feeling. They think releasing the map means releasing the desire. They think detachment means indifference. So they grip harder. They rehearse what they want with white knuckles and a racing heart, and they wonder why the thing they want keeps retreating like a shadow on a wall. The answer is not in their strategy. The answer is in what they are broadcasting before the strategy even begins. Here is the open question. Stay with it as this chapter unfolds. Why is it that two people can want the exact same thing, work the exact same hours, follow the exact same plan, and arrive at entirely different outcomes? The answer is not luck. You will find it before this chapter is done. Think about a woman named Clara. Clara ran a small catering business in a mid-sized city. For 3 years, she chased a single contract with a hotel group that would have tripled her revenue overnight. She prepared every proposal carefully. She revised her pricing. She followed up on every email within the hour. And every time a meeting was scheduled, she walked in the door with the same invisible weight strapped to her chest. The weight of needing this to work. The hotel group could feel it, not consciously, but the way you feel when someone is looking at you as a solution to their problem rather than as a person. The meetings ended politely. The contracts went elsewhere. Then Clara's father got sick. Suddenly, the hotel contract stopped being the most important thing in her life. She still wanted it, but the wanting moved to a quieter shelf inside her. She took one final meeting, not because she needed it to work, but because she had built something worth showing. She walked in carrying only what she had made. No performance of necessity. No silent pleading under the surface. She got the contract within 2 weeks of that meeting. Clara did not become more skilled in those 2 weeks. She became someone the outcome was willing to approach. That is the whole story, and you already know what it means. But notice what happened inside you when you heard it. Some part of you recognized that feeling, the weight of needing something to work. The meetings you have walked into carrying that same invisible cargo. The relationships, the applications, the pitches. You have been Clara in that first version more times than you want to count. And so has every person who has ever wanted something badly enough to accidentally repel it. This is your mirror moment. Turn back to that point 3 years ago in your relationship with what you wanted. Were you chasing it with your jaw tight and your chest contracted, measuring yourself against a finish line that kept moving? Were you running calculations, how much time you had left, how far behind you were, what it would say about you if this did not work out? That is the desperation frequency. Not dramatic, not loud, just a low, persistent hum of not yet, not enough, not there. And that frequency is not neutral. It is a signal. It tells everything in your environment exactly how to treat you. The frequency of enough is different in every way. It does not mean you have stopped caring. It means the caring has stopped controlling you. It means you want the thing the way you want the sun to rise, with complete confidence and zero grip. The sun will rise whether you watch for it anxiously or sleep soundly through the night. Your certainty about it does not produce it. But your certainty about yourself, about what you already are, what you already carry, what you already offer, that changes who shows up in your proximity and what they bring. Here is the revelation this whole book has been building toward. Delivered quietly, because quiet is where it lands. Sufficiency is not a reward for good behavior. It is not a destination you reach after you have earned enough, achieved enough, or fixed enough about yourself. Sufficiency is an address, and you either live there or you do not. The shift this chapter is asking you to make is not an action. It is a relocation. You are no longer the person becoming enough. You are the person who is enough already. The wealth, the opportunity, the right room, the right conversation, they do not create that truth. They confirm it. That distinction is everything. When you are becoming, you need proof to feel certain. When you are being, certainty is what generates the proof. This is why Clara's contract arrived after she stopped needing it. The needing was a declaration of incompleteness. The release was a declaration of arrival, and the world responds to declarations. This is also the answer to the question left open at the start of this chapter. Two people, same desire, same hours, same plan, different outcomes. The difference is their interior address. One is broadcasting from a place of deficit. The future is where I will be enough. The other is broadcasting from a place of presence. The future is where what I already am gets to show up in a new form. Opportunity does not travel toward deficit. It travels toward its own frequency. Certainty draws certainty. Sufficiency draws sufficiency. Now here is where the open hand returns. You have heard this motif woven through this book because the hand is the most honest image of your relationship with what you want. A closed hand grips. Gripping is a signal. It says this might be taken from me. It says I do not trust that more is coming. It says what I have is all I have. An open hand holds, lightly, present, available. An open hand can receive because it is not already full of its own fear. The final image of this chapter is simple. You, right now, with nothing gripped. Not because you have given up. Not because you have made peace with having less. But because you have made a different kind of peace with what you already are. Nothing missing in this moment, nothing to perform. Nothing to prove to the world before it is allowed to reward you. As this book keeps moving, you will come to a point about action that pushes directly against the usual belief. When that point settles, it shifts how you move through every opportunity from that point forward. But for now, rest in this. The shift is complete when enough stops being a destination and becomes the address you already live at. The question the next chapter answers is this: what does someone who already lives at that address actually do differently when they step out the door? Chapter 13. The wanting that brought you here is gone. Something has changed in you. You have not named it yet. Not the circumstances, those may still look the same. Not the bank balance, not the title, not the address. Something quieter has shifted. Something underneath all of that. The fact that you have not celebrated it yet might be the most telling thing of all. Think about why you picked up this book. Think about the version of you who reached for it. There was a specific feeling driving that reach, a pressure, a tightness, something that felt like urgency wearing the costume of ambition. You wanted more because you were afraid of less. That fear had a frequency, a hum you carried into every decision, every negotiation, every quiet moment before sleep. The question this chapter sits with is not whether that frequency was wrong. The question is whether it is still there, because here is what most people never pause long enough to notice. The proof of the change is not the arrival of the thing you wanted. The proof is the disappearance of the need that was chasing it. Let that settle before we go anywhere else. Go back to the beginning of this book for a moment, not to the pages but to the feeling. There was someone named Theo in those early chapters, a man who wanted so badly that his wanting had become the very wall between him and what he was seeking. You probably recognized something in Theo. Most people do, not because they are him exactly. Because they have felt that particular kind of desperation, the kind that disguises itself as drive, that tells you the intensity of your wanting is proof of your seriousness. Theo was serious. No one doubted that. But seriousness and desperation are not the same thing, and the world does not reward them equally. Here is where we close a loop that has been open since the first chapter. The question asked then, not in words, but underneath all the words, was this: what would it feel like to want something without the need bleeding through every pore of your pursuit? What would it feel like to hold the goal the way you hold an open hand, present and available but not clenched? You have been building toward the answer for every chapter since. Now sit with this honestly. When you imagine the future you have been working toward, the financial ease, the options, the space, does your chest tighten the way it used to? Is there still that low-grade panic underneath the picture? That sense that if it does not arrive soon, something is fundamentally wrong with you? Or has the picture become something you can look at steadily, clearly, without the desperation frequency humming behind it? That shift, subtle as it sounds, is not small. It is everything. There is a woman named Carla who ran a small catering business out of a shared kitchen in a mid-sized city. For 3 years, she had chased a contract with a large corporate client. A contract she was convinced would finally prove the business was real. That she was not fooling herself. That all the early mornings were worth it. She applied twice. She was passed over twice. Both times she spent the week after the rejection rehearsing what she should have said, calculating what she had done wrong, recalibrating with a frantic energy that exhausted everyone around her, including herself. Then something happened, not to the business, to Carla. She stopped needing the contract to mean what she had decided it meant, not because she gave up, not because she settled, but because somewhere in the ordinary passage of months, she had built enough small wins, enough evidence, enough quiet mornings where the work felt like hers and not like an audition, that the contract became a preference instead of a lifeline. She still wanted it. That part did not disappear. But the need drained out of the wanting the way heat drains out of a room when a window opens. She got the contract 6 weeks later. The client told her afterward during a casual lunch that what had sold them was her presentation, not the numbers, the way she presented. She had seemed, the client said, like someone who already knew where she was going. They had wanted to be part of a story already in motion, not the rescue of one about to collapse. Carla did not correct him. Return to the season you were in before these last 3 years unfolded, as it really was. Not financially, internally. Think about the quality of your wanting back then. Was it quiet or was it loud? Was it clear or was it clouded with urgency? Compare that to right now, not to some imagined future version of yourself. Right now, today, in this moment, something is different. The difference might be small. It might feel almost imperceptible. But imperceptible and absent are not the same thing. Here is the principle this chapter is built to deliver, not as a comfort, as a mechanical fact. The desperation frequency, that specific signal of need-based wanting, is not just uncomfortable to carry. It actively distorts your decisions. It makes you negotiate from scarcity when the numbers do not require it. It makes you accept terms that a calmer version of you would have declined. It makes other people feel your need before you speak a word. And need, in the world of opportunity, is not attractive. It signals risk. It signals instability. It closes doors that ambition alone would have opened. The magnet does not pull harder when you grip it tighter. The magnet pulls harder when you trust the field. And you have been learning to trust the field. This is the identity shift the whole book has been pointing toward. It is not dramatic. It does not arrive with a sound. It arrives as an absence. The absence of the tight chest before a pitch. The absence of the obsessive rehearsal at 2 in the morning. The absence of the need to check your account to reassure yourself that you still exist. These absences are not evidence that you have stopped caring. They are evidence that you have stopped confusing caring with suffering. You can want something fully and cleanly, the way you want sunlight on a cold day. Genuinely, without clutching at it, without making your worth contingent on its arrival. That is not detachment in the cold, distant, I do not care sense. That is detachment in the precise sense. Your identity is no longer attached to the outcome. You are no longer Theo at the edge of the deal, white-knuckling the result. You are someone who already lives at a particular address internally. The external address is simply a matter of time and action. The open hand. That image has returned again and again through this book, and here is why. A closed fist can hold what it already has. An open hand can receive what is coming. The wanting that brought you to chapter 1 was a closed fist. Closed fists are not wrong. They are not shameful. They are a response to fear, and fear was reasonable given where you were. But you have been practicing opening that hand, and the practice shows. The proof of detachment is not the arrival of wealth. It is the disappearance of the need that was blocking it. That is the line this entire book was building toward, not as inspiration, as instruction. Because once you can feel the difference, once you can notice in real time when the desperation frequency has crept back in, when your wanting has tightened from preference back into need, you have the only tool you actually require. You can choose. You can breathe, open the hand, and return to the state that does not repel the thing you are working toward. The version of you who started this book needed to learn that wanting less was even possible. The version of you finishing it already knows it is not about wanting less. It is about wanting differently. Tomorrow, you will step out of that internal address and into the world. The final question this book leaves you with is not a question at all. It is an observation waiting to be confirmed. Watch what you attract when you stop needing to. Chapter 14. Hold the life lightly, it comes to open hands. Every civilization that has ever risen and fallen left behind the same carving in different stone. The name changes, the language changes, the century changes, but the figure is always the same, a person with open hands, palms facing up, receiving what the clenched figure beside them could never hold. This is not metaphor invented by poets. It is a posture encoded in the oldest human records of how wealth and grace actually move, not toward the one who demands, toward the one who is ready. You have spent 13 chapters learning what that readiness actually costs, not your comfort, but your grip. And now you are standing at the end of something, which means you are standing at the beginning of something else. What changes in the next few minutes is not what you know. It is who you are when you walk away from this. Watch what you attract when you stop needing to. That line ended the last chapter. Sit with it for just a moment before moving forward. It is not a promise, it is a report. It is what people who have made this shift describe almost without exception in the same stunned and quiet voice. They do not say things started going well. They say things started arriving. There is a difference, and you already know what that difference feels like from the outside. You have seen someone who has it, someone who does not scramble and yet seems to find everything within reach. You may have told yourself they were lucky, or well-connected, or born into something you were not. But some part of you suspected the real variable was something harder to name. It was this: open hands, not as a spiritual exercise, not as a visualization you perform before sleep, as a permanent identity, as the posture your whole life takes when you have finally stopped confusing wanting with needing and need with emergency. Think about who you were when you started this book, not abstractly, specifically. Think about what money felt like in your body 3 months ago or 3 years ago. Think about the particular tension that lived in your chest when a bill arrived, or when someone else got the thing you had been working toward. That tension had a name, even if you never said it out loud. It was the desperation frequency. The signal your entire nervous system was broadcasting 24 hours a day to every room you walked into, every conversation you had, every decision you made. And that signal did not attract what you wanted. It announced what you lacked. It turned every opportunity into a negotiation conducted from weakness. You cannot out-hustle a signal like that. There is a woman named Claudia who spent 4 years building a consulting practice that never quite took off. She was talented. Her clients got results, but every sales call she made carried something invisible, a kind of urgency that the person on the other end could not name but always felt. She needed the contract, and the need was louder than the pitch. Prospects would tell her they needed to think about it. They would go quiet. She would follow up twice, 3 times, and each follow-up tightened the frequency further. One afternoon she got off a call that had gone badly, and she made a decision that had nothing to do with strategy. She decided to stop treating her business like a life raft, not because she no longer cared whether it succeeded, because she understood, finally, that caring and gripping were not the same thing. The next call she made, something in her voice had changed. She was not performing confidence. She was not pretending the outcome did not matter. She simply was not drowning anymore. The prospect signed that day, and then the next one did, and the one after that. Claudia did not change her pitch. She changed her hands. Do you see what actually happened there? The work was always good enough. The offer was always real. What was broken was the posture, the white-knuckled holding that made every potential client feel, somewhere below conscious thought, that they were being grabbed rather than invited. This is the open loop that has been running since the first page of this book. You were asked to consider why the people who want money most are so often the ones who cannot seem to keep it. Why desire, at a certain pitch, becomes a repellent force instead of a magnetic one. The answer is not that you wanted too much. The answer is that you held it too tight before it even arrived. Wealth does not respond to desperation. It never has. Not because the universe is punishing you for needing things, but because the behaviors that grow from desperation, the short-term decisions, the anxious negotiating, the inability to walk away from a bad deal, those behaviors structurally produce outcomes that look like scarcity. The desperation frequency is not mystical. It is mechanical. It changes what you do, and what you do changes what you get. The new identity you are stepping into is not the identity of someone who has wealth. That is the destination. The identity is something you can inhabit right now, today, before the account balance changes by a single dollar. It is the identity of someone whose hands are always open enough to receive. Open hands do not mean empty hands. They mean hands that hold without strangling. Hands that can put something down when it no longer serves them. Hands that do not confuse ownership with security or accumulation with arrival. You can hold a full life in open hands. You can hold real wealth in open hands. You can hold love and work and ambition and rest in open hands. What you cannot hold there is the desperate grip itself. The moment you open them, the grip is gone. And the moment the grip is gone, the frequency changes. You become someone different when you stop needing to be saved by the outcome. You become someone who can wait without wilting, who can pursue without chasing, who can care deeply about a result and still remain intact if it takes longer than expected or arrives in a shape you did not anticipate. That is not indifference. Do not confuse this with indifference. Indifference is a closed hand that simply stopped caring what it holds. What you are building is different. It is a hand that stays open because it trusts the flow, because it has learned through everything in the preceding chapters that the flow is real and that it moves toward readiness, not toward need. Here is the final mirror this book will offer you. Think about the one thing you have wanted for the longest time. The financial outcome, the number, the circumstance. The thing you have reached for and watched recede. Ask yourself honestly, how have you been holding it? Has it been a goal or a life raft? Has it been a direction or an emergency? Has it been something you were moving toward or something you were drowning without? There is no judgment in that question. There is only information. And the information is useful now in a way it could not have been before you understood what it actually costs to hold something that tightly. Put the grip down, not the desire, not the direction, not the discipline or the work or the standard. Put down the grip. Let the want exist without the need. Let the goal be real without being the condition of your survival. This is the entire book in a single posture. This is 13 chapters of paradox resolved in one physical gesture. Right now, wherever you are, open your hands. If you are walking, let them relax at your sides, palms loose and forward. If you are sitting, rest them open in your lap. Feel the difference between a fist and an open palm. That difference is not symbolic. It is the difference between a life that is constantly bracing and a life that is constantly ready. One contracts around what it fears losing. The other expands into what it is prepared to receive. Everything this book has asked of you comes down to that. Stay there. The things you have been working for do not require you to suffer for them on arrival. They require you to be someone they can actually reach. And you are, finally, that person now. Your hands are open.